Marcus was just 14 years old, but he didn't have a home. He didn't have a bed, and most days he didn't even have food. He lived on the streets of downtown Atlanta, wearing the same clothes every day, torn, dirty, and weathered by countless nights under bridges and in abandoned doorways. His feet were always bare because shoes were a luxury he couldn't afford. To survive, Marcus picked bottles and pieces of scrap metal from dumpsters, placing them in a large garbage bag, hoping to sell them for a few dollars. Sometimes he got lucky. A kind stranger would give him $5. Other times people would shout at him, "Get away from here. You're making this place look bad." But Marcus never gave up, even when his stomach made loud sounds, even when he hadn't eaten all day. That morning, the Georgia sun rose hot and unforgiving. Marcus woke up early from the cold concrete where he had slept behind a McDonald's. His back ached, his lips were cracked, and his belly had been empty since the day before. He picked up his worn garbage bag, the one he used to collect bottles and scrap metal, and began to walk slowly. His legs felt weak, but he pushed forward through the busy streets of downtown Atlanta, searching through gutters and trash piles. He found 2 crushed Coca-Cola bottles, 1 bent aluminum can, and a few pieces of copper wire. He smiled a little and dropped them into his bag. "Maybe today I'll get enough money to buy something to eat," he whispered to himself. Soon he reached the bustling marketplace near Centennial Olympic Park. The area was full of noise. Vendors shouted prices, business people rushed past with their phones pressed to their ears, and the smell of food from nearby restaurants made his stomach clench with hunger. Marcus walked to the first food truck and said gently, "Excuse me, sir, do you have any food you're not going to use?" The man behind the counter turned quickly. "Get out of here. You think I run a charity?" he snapped. Marcus stepped back quietly and walked to the next vendor, a woman selling fruit smoothies. "Just a small cup, ma'am, even if it's old?" he asked. She ignored him completely, like he didn't exist. Marcus walked from stall to stall. Nobody looked at him. Some waved him away with anger. Others just turned their heads. His stomach hurt. His eyes burned from the heat, but he didn't cry. Then he saw a small group of teenagers eating hot dogs near a bench. One of them dropped a piece on the ground and didn't pick it up. Marcus waited until they walked away. Then he slowly bent down and picked up the piece, wiping the dirt with his shirt. He didn't care what it was. His belly needed something. But before he could eat it, a stray dog ran past and snatched it from his hand. Marcus sat down on the curb, his arms wrapped around his knees. He tried to stay calm. "Maybe the dumpsters will feed me today," he said softly. He got up again and walked behind a nearby upscale restaurant where food waste was thrown every day. The smell was overwhelming, the flies were everywhere, but to Marcus this was hope. He dug through the trash carefully, lifting lids and checking containers. Finally he found it. A small container of pasta salad, not too dirty, not too spoiled. His heart jumped. "Thank you, God," he whispered. He took the container, rinsed it quickly with water from a leaking pipe, and sat under a small tree beside the dumpster. He placed his bag down, opened the container with shaky hands, and smiled. This was his first meal in 2 days. He lifted a forkful to his mouth, but just then he heard a sound behind the dumpster. A quiet thud like someone had fallen. He looked up. There, lying on the ground, was a woman. Her expensive designer clothes were now dusty, her face was wet with sweat, and she was holding her stomach. She was very pregnant. Marcus dropped the fork. His heart started beating fast. He stood up and rushed to the woman lying beside the dumpster. Her eyes were closed, her hands were shaking, and her belly was huge. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Ma'am, are you okay?" Marcus asked, kneeling beside her. She didn't answer. Marcus looked around. The busy street was just yards away, but nobody was looking. Nobody had seen her fall. Nobody cared. He held her hand. It was ice cold. He looked at the container of pasta salad in his other hand, the only food he had. He looked at the woman again. Her lips were dry, her breathing was shallow, and the baby inside her seemed distressed. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He brought the food close to her mouth and carefully fed her small bits of pasta with a plastic fork. "Please eat, ma'am, just a little. You need to eat," he said softly. The woman opened her eyes slowly. Tears rolled down the sides of her face. She looked at Marcus's face, dusty, tired, sweaty, then at the food in his hand and the genuine kindness in his eyes. Why are you helping me?" she whispered. Marcus gave a small smile. "Because I know what hunger feels like. Nobody helped me yesterday, but I don't want your baby to suffer." The woman cried. She ate slowly, painfully. Marcus helped her sit up against the brick wall and wiped her forehead with the edge of his shirt. She began to breathe better, and her body stopped shaking. After a few minutes she spoke again. "My name is Jasmine." Marcus nodded. "I'm Marcus." She looked at him and smiled weakly. "Marcus, you have the kindest heart. I didn't think anyone still cared about strangers." She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a business card. It was slightly bent but clean. "Take this. It's my business card. One day, if you ever need help, find me." Marcus took the card and looked at it. He couldn't read all the words, but he saw her name. Jasmine Patterson, CEO. He helped her to her feet. She stood slowly, one hand holding her belly, the other holding his arm for support. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, then walked slowly away into the crowd. Marcus watched her until she disappeared among the people. He looked down at the empty container. No food left. His stomach was still empty, but his heart felt full. "Maybe today I did something right," he whispered. He picked up his bag and walked back into the street, back to his life, back to hunger, back to survival. But this time, he had a card in his pocket and hope in his heart. Now, before that day in the marketplace, before Jasmine lay weak beside that dumpster, she was someone completely different. She was the wife of one of Atlanta's most powerful real estate moguls. Her husband, Jerome Patterson, was a man who owned skyscrapers, luxury car dealerships, and million-dollar properties across Georgia. When they walked into a room, people stood. When they spoke, others listened. But money doesn't always bring peace or loyalty. First, their love seemed perfect. They traveled to Paris, laughed at charity galas, and dreamed of building an empire together. Jasmine had given up her own career aspirations to support Jerome's vision, to be the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect partner. But slowly, everything began to change. Jerome became consumed with power, obsessed with status, and completely indifferent to her needs. And one devastating evening, Jasmine discovered a truth that shattered her world completely. She found the photos on his phone. Him with another woman, much younger, in expensive hotels, on romantic getaways that Jasmine thought were business trips. When she confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. He simply said, "I'm a successful man with certain needs. If you can't handle that, then maybe you're not the woman I thought you were." Jasmine's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She had loved him with everything she had, sacrificed her dreams for his, built her entire identity around being his wife. But now he was treating her like she was disposable, like she meant nothing. She was already 3 months pregnant when she made the decision to leave. She walked out of their mansion in Buckhead with just her purse and her dignity, refusing to take his money, refusing to let him control her through financial dependence. But what she didn't anticipate was how quickly her world would collapse. Her phone service was cut off, her credit cards were cancelled, and she had nowhere to go. For weeks, she moved from shelter to shelter, trying to maintain her strength and protect her unborn child. But one afternoon, as hunger consumed her and her legs could no longer carry her, she collapsed behind that restaurant dumpster. She was no longer Mrs. Patterson, the socialite. She was just Jasmine, tired, alone, forgotten, hungry, and pregnant. Many years passed. Marcus was no longer that 14-year-old boy. He was now 26, but still living on the streets of Atlanta. He had grown taller, his face was more weathered, But his life hadn't changed much. He still carried that same garbage bag, still picked bottles and scrap metal, still slept under the same overpass on cold nights. Some days were better. He found enough recyclables to buy a meal at McDonald's. Other days, his stomach stayed empty from sunrise to sunset. But Marcus never became bitter or angry. He still smiled at children walking to school, still shared what little he had with stray animals, and deep in his pocket, he still kept that old weathered business card. Jasmine Patterson, CEO. He had never used it. He didn't even know if she was still alive, but somehow that card represented hope, proof that kindness existed, that connections mattered, that maybe someday things could be different. One afternoon, the Atlanta sun was blazing, and the streets were busy with rush-hour traffic. Marcus was crossing Peachtree Street with his bag full of aluminum cans. He had spotted more recyclables on the other side and wanted to collect them before the street cleaners came. He looked left, he looked right, the crosswalk showed the walking signal. He stepped out carefully into the intersection. Suddenly, a loud screech pierced the air. A black SUV came speeding around the corner, running the red light. Before Marcus could jump back, the vehicle slammed into him with devastating force. People screamed. His bag flew through the air, cans scattered across the asphalt like confetti. Marcus lay motionless on the hot pavement, blood slowly spreading beneath him. A crowd gathered around his broken body. "He's not breathing," someone shouted. "Call 911. That's the homeless guy who's always around here." An ambulance rushed him to Grady Memorial Hospital, Atlanta's premier trauma center. He was unconscious, his head bleeding severely, his chest barely rising and falling. The paramedics weren't optimistic. In the emergency room, doctors and nurses worked frantically to stabilize him. And then a nurse stepped into the trauma bay. She had confident eyes, steady hands, and a heart that once knew desperation. The moment she saw the patient's face, her breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, looked again, and whispered in shock, "Marcus." She turned to the head trauma surgeon beside her. "Please, Dr. Johnson, let me handle this case personally. I'll take full responsibility for his care." The surgeon nodded, seeing the determination in her eyes. She placed her hand gently on Marcus's chest and whispered, "You fed me when you had nothing. Now I'm going to fight to keep you alive." It was Jasmine, but she was no longer the broken pregnant woman from 12 years ago. She was Dr. Jasmine Patterson, one of Atlanta's most respected trauma nurses, and she was about to repay a debt that had shaped her entire life. Stories like this remind me why I started this channel. Real human connections, real transformation, real hope. If you're feeling this story the way I am right now, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because I share these powerful true stories every week that will restore your faith in humanity. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in Marcus's story. And honestly, you don't want to miss the incredible true stories coming up on this channel. Subscribe now, and let's continue this journey together. Marcus lay in the intensive care unit, unconscious, with bandages covering his head and chest. Machines beeped steadily beside him. A ventilator helped him breathe, and multiple IVs dripped life-sustaining medications into his veins. His face looked peaceful but fragile, like he might slip away at any moment. Jasmine sat by his bedside, still in her scrubs, her hand gently holding his. She hadn't left his side in 18 hours. "You don't know who I became, Marcus," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "But you saved my life that day behind the restaurant. I was ready to give up, ready to believe that humanity was dead." She remembered everything with perfect clarity. The food he shared, the gentle way he fed her, the way he walked away with nothing left for himself but somehow seemed richer than any millionaire she'd ever known. "You gave me your only meal, Marcus. You looked at a stranger and chose compassion over your own survival. And now I'm going to give you a second chance at life." Days passed like a vigil. Every morning, Jasmine cleaned his wounds with the tenderness of a mother caring for her child. She monitored his vital signs personally, spoke to him constantly even though he couldn't respond, and refused to let other nurses take over his care during her shifts. She sat with him during the nights when other staff went home, reading to him, playing soft music, telling him stories about her journey from that dumpster to this moment. The other medical staff noticed her extraordinary dedication. "He must be family," one doctor observed. Jasmine smiled softly and replied, "He's not my brother, he's not my husband, but he's the reason I'm standing here today. He's the reason I believed I deserved to survive and rebuild my life." On the 7th morning, just as the sun began to rise over Atlanta, Jasmine was gently wiping Marcus's face with a warm cloth when suddenly, his fingers moved. He gasped, "Marcus!" His eyes opened slowly, blinking against the light. He looked confused, disoriented. Where am I?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears of relief and joy. She leaned closer and smiled. "You're safe now. You're in a hospital, you've been unconscious for a week, but you're going to be okay. And most importantly, you're not alone." He looked at her face. Kind, familiar, but different somehow. Older, more confident, wearing medical scrubs instead of designer clothes. "I know you," he whispered. You were pregnant. Behind the dumpster." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, and you gave me food when you had nothing. I never forgot you, Marcus. I never forgot what you did for me." Tears rolled down his face for the first time in years. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming realization that someone had remembered him, that someone cared. He tried to sit up, but she gently stopped him. "Don't move yet. Just rest. I'm going to take care of everything." Marcus closed his eyes again, not from exhaustion but from a peace he had never experienced. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't feel invisible. He felt human, valued, loved. Marcus spent 3 more weeks in the hospital. Every single day, Jasmine came to check on him, not just as his nurse, but as someone who genuinely cared about his recovery. She brought him books to help pass the time, comfortable clothes to replace his torn streetwear, and most importantly, she brought him hope. She told him about her journey after that day behind the dumpster, how his kindness had given her the strength to rebuild her life, to pursue nursing, to become someone who could help others the way he had helped her. One morning, Dr. Johnson entered the room with a smile. "Marcus, your recovery has been remarkable. You're strong enough to be discharged today." Marcus sat on the hospital bed, uncertainty clouding his face. "But where will I go?" he whispered, looking down at his hands. He had no home, no family, no money. Nothing waiting for him except those same cold streets and the same daily struggle for survival. Jasmine walked into the room carrying a small bag of his personal belongings and saw his expression. She sat down beside him on the bed and took his hands in hers. "You don't have to worry about where you're going," she said gently. "You're coming home with me." Marcus looked up, confusion and disbelief in his eyes. "To where?" "To my home," she replied with a warm smile. "To the family that began the day you chose to care about a stranger." That evening, Jasmine drove Marcus through the neighborhoods of Atlanta in her modest Honda Civic, a far cry from the luxury vehicle she once knew, but filled with something much more valuable: love and genuine connection. They passed busy commercial districts, quiet residential areas, and finally pulled into the parking lot of a comfortable apartment complex. Children played in the courtyard while their parents watched from nearby benches. Everything looked peaceful, safe, alive with the sounds of community. Marcus stepped out slowly, still recovering from his injuries but amazed by what he was seeing. He had never lived anywhere like this. A place where families gathered, where people knew each other's names, where children could play without fear. Jasmine led him up 2 flights of stairs to apartment 3B. She opened the door to reveal a cozy, well-maintained home filled with the warm smells of dinner cooking and the sound of someone humming in the kitchen. "Mom, you're home," called a voice from the kitchen. A young woman emerged. She appeared to be about 24 years old, with beautiful dark eyes, natural hair styled in locks, and a bright, welcoming smile. She was wearing medical scrubs similar to Jasmine's, and she carried herself with the same confident kindness that Marcus remembered from that day behind the dumpster. "Kennedy, I want you to meet someone very special," Jasmine said, her voice filled with emotion. "This is Marcus. A long time ago, before you were born, Marcus saved both of our lives." Kennedy looked at him with curiosity and genuine warmth, then stepped forward and extended her hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "My mom has told me about you my entire life. She always said that if it wasn't for your kindness, I wouldn't be here today." Marcus's hands trembled as he shook Kennedy's hand. He looked at Jasmine with wonder. This is the baby from that day?" Jasmine nodded, pride radiating from her face. "Yes, I named her Kennedy because it means strong leader. She just graduated from nursing school last month. She's going to save lives, just like you saved ours." Marcus could barely speak. His eyes filled with tears as he realized the full impact of that moment 12 years ago. His single act of compassion had not only saved Jasmine's life but had allowed Kennedy to be born, to grow up, to become someone who would now help others in turn. The ripple effects of kindness had traveled further than he could have ever imagined. That night, for the first time in over a decade, Marcus slept in an actual bed with clean sheets, a soft pillow, and a roof that didn't leak. He lay awake for a while, listening to the sounds of a real home: Jasmine washing dishes in the kitchen, Kennedy talking on the phone with a friend, the distant sound of families in neighboring apartments living their lives in safety and comfort. He had never experienced anything like this sense of belonging. Weeks turned into months. Marcus became part of the Patterson household in ways that felt natural and healing for everyone involved. He helped maintain the apartment, accompanied Jasmine to the grocery store, and even started attending Kennedy's graduation events as her proud honorary uncle. But most importantly, he began to believe that he had value beyond just surviving each day. Jasmine noticed his intelligence and hunger for knowledge. She bought him books, helped him practice reading and writing, and encouraged him to explore subjects that interested him. Marcus discovered that he had a natural aptitude for understanding how things worked: mechanical systems, electronics, problem-solving. Skills that had helped him survive on the streets could be transformed into legitimate career opportunities. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table sharing a meal that Marcus had helped prepare, Jasmine made an announcement that would change his life forever. "Marcus, I've been talking to my friend Dr. Williams at the hospital. He runs the medical equipment maintenance department, and they need someone with your kind of practical intelligence and attention to detail. He's willing to offer you an entry-level position with full training." Marcus nearly choked on his food. "A real job? At the hospital?" Jasmine smiled. "Not just any job. Career. With benefits, steady pay, and opportunities to grow. You'd be maintaining the same kinds of equipment that helped save your life." Tears rolled down his cheeks. Happy tears that seemed to come so easily now. "I don't know how to thank you, Jasmine. You didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to live, a purpose, a family." "You don't need to thank me," she replied. "You gave me those same things 12 years ago when I needed them most. This is just love coming full circle." 6 months later, Marcus woke up every morning with purpose and dignity. He wore clean work uniforms with his name embroidered on the pocket. He had his own apartment in the same complex as Jasmine and Kennedy, but they still shared dinner together most evenings like a real family. He had steady income, health insurance, and for the first time in his life a savings account. He was no longer just surviving, he was thriving. But more than the material improvements, Marcus had something he'd never experienced before: unconditional love and belonging. He wasn't just the former homeless man who got a lucky break. He was Uncle Marcus to Kennedy, trusted friend to Jasmine, and a valued employee at the hospital. He had become someone who mattered, someone who contributed, someone whose presence made other people's lives better. On weekends, he volunteered at local homeless shelters, sharing his story and offering hope to people who were living the life he once knew. He carried extra granola bars in his work truck, and always had a few dollars to share with people he encountered on the streets. He understood that not everyone would get the same miraculous second chance he'd received, but he could at least ensure that his good fortune rippled outward to help others. Now here's where the story gets complicated, and I know some of you are going to have strong feelings about what happens next. 2 years after Marcus started his new life, Jasmine received an unexpected phone call. It was Jerome, her ex-husband. He had tracked her down through mutual connections and wanted to meet. Against Marcus's advice and Kennedy's concerns, Jasmine agreed to hear him out. Jerome had lost most of his wealth in bad investments and legal troubles. He was facing bankruptcy, health problems, and the collapse of everything he had built his identity around. "I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you go," he told Jasmine during their meeting at a downtown Atlanta cafe. "I've spent years realizing that you were the only real thing in my world of fake relationships and business deals. I want to make things right. I want us to be a family again. You, me, and Kennedy." Here's what divides people about this story. Jasmine actually considered it. Not because she still loved Jerome, but because part of her wondered if Kennedy deserved the financial stability and opportunities that Jerome could provide, even if he was a different man now. She wondered if her current happiness was enough, or if she owed it to her daughter to give her access to the wealth and connections that Jerome's world could offer. Marcus watched this internal struggle with a breaking heart. After everything they had built together, after proving that love and character mattered more than money, was Jasmine really considering going back to the man who had abandoned her when she needed him most? Kennedy was furious with her mother for even entertaining the idea. "That man threw us away like garbage," she said. "Marcus was there when we had nothing. He's family. Jerome is just DNA and broken promises." For weeks, Jasmine wrestled with the decision. She saw how much pain her indecision was causing Marcus, who had started withdrawing from family dinners and spending more time alone. She also saw Kennedy's disappointment in her mother's wavering loyalty to the man who had truly saved their lives. The resolution came in an unexpected way. Jerome showed up uninvited at Jasmine's apartment one evening when Marcus was visiting. He saw the life they had built together, the laughter, the comfort, the genuine love, and his jealousy turned ugly. "So this is what you chose over me," he said to Jasmine, gesturing toward Marcus. "A maintenance worker? A former homeless man? You gave up everything we could have had together for this." Marcus stood up calmly and looked Jerome directly in the eyes. "What we have together is something you never understood and couldn't give her even when you had millions of dollars. Respect. Loyalty. Love without conditions. I've been homeless, but I've never been as poor as you are right now." That moment crystallized everything for Jasmine. She looked at Jerome, still handsome, still charismatic, but hollow in ways that wealth couldn't fill. Then she looked at Marcus, scarred by life but rich in character, integrity, and genuine love. "Jerome, you're right. I did choose this over what you offered. And I'd make that choice again every single day." Jerome left angry and defeated. Jasmine turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry I ever made you doubt how much you mean to this family. You are the best man I've ever known, and I was a fool to think for even a moment that anything else mattered more than that." Marcus took her hands in his. "You weren't a fool. You were a mother trying to do right by her daughter. But some things are more valuable than money, and some connections run deeper than blood. We are family, not because we have to be, but because we choose to be every single day." And so the story ends not with a fairy tale reunion or dramatic revenge, but with something more powerful. The quiet triumph of chosen family over biological obligation, of character over wealth, of love that grows from gratitude and shared struggle rather than passion that fades when times get tough. Marcus now wakes up every morning knowing that he is valued, not for what he can provide financially, but for who he is as a human being. Jasmine has learned that real security comes from people who love you at your worst, not people who only want you at your best. And Kennedy has grown up understanding that family is defined by loyalty and love, not by genetics or bank accounts. Therefore, my dear viewers, sometimes the people who have nothing are the ones who give the most. And sometimes one small act of kindness can return like a miracle many years later, transforming not just two lives, but rippling outward to change an entire community. Don't look down on anyone. The person you help today may be the one to save your life tomorrow. But more than that, the person you dismiss today might be the one who teaches you what real wealth actually looks like. Marcus's story reminds us that dignity isn't determined by your address, character isn't measured by your bank account, and family isn't limited to people who share your last name. In a world that often values what you have over who you are, Marcus and Jasmine's bond represents something revolutionary. The idea that our greatest treasures are found in human connections built on mutual respect, genuine care, and the courage to choose love over fear, again and again, no matter what anyone else thinks about our choices. I know there are two sides to this story. Some of you think Jasmine was wrong for even considering Jerome's offer. Others might think she was smart to explore her options for Kennedy's sake. That's exactly why I love sharing these real-life stories. They're messy, complicated, and they make us examine our own values and choices. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think differently about family, love, and second chances, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. I share powerful true stories like this every day that will make you question everything you think you know about human nature, forgiveness, and what really matters in life. And trust me, the story I'm sharing next week will blow your mind even more than this one did. Subscribe now. And let's build a community of people who believe in the power of real human connection. I'll see you in the next story.